Welcome to Meet Your Neighbor, the podcast that highlights the people and stories that make Westbrook Village a truly exceptional community. I'm your host, Steve Marilla, local realtor, neighbor, and proud member of this vibrant community. Each episode, we sit down with residents to learn about their careers, life experiences, and what brought them to Westbrook Village. It's a chance to connect, share, and celebrate the unique journeys that shape our neighborhood. Thanks for tuning in. And now, let's meet your neighbor. In part 2 of our conversation with Brad, we talk a little pickleball, and we also hear how he went from being a corporate defense attorney to becoming a first-time author. After retiring, Brad followed his passion for history and wrote a book about Alton B. Parker, a little-known presidential candidate from 1904. It's a great story about starting something new after a long career. Now let's meet your neighbor. Hello, Brad.
Hi, Steve.
Welcome back for Brad Part 2.
Thanks for having me back.
So in the last episode with Brad, we didn't finish the story. We stopped we talked about that case. We talked about how you got in to be an attorney and somewhat about it. And I'd like to pick up towards the end of your career and going into retirement because I know, because you just told me, and I knew that you were an author. Are they out on audiobook, by the way? Because that's how I read.
No.
Okay.
You can get them on a Kindle or,
Okay.
Electronically,
Sure.
or hard copy or paperback.
Gotcha.
But there are no audio. Nobody has recorded them yet.
Okay. Well, let's start with end of your career.
Yeah.
You're winding down your career. What was that like, and what did you do to get out of it?
So, after 28 years of actively practicing,
Yep.
so representing people in court, trying cases, I decided I'd had enough. I was done.
Right.
It was very high pressure. It was basically, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And I thought 28 years was enough. So I told my wife, I don't want to do this anymore. And she said, okay, that's okay, but you got to go do something because you
Really?
can't retire yet. So
Okay.
I was like, all right. So I told my firm that I gave them about a year's notice. I told them that I was going to leave at the end of 19.
Okay.
And they said, okay. And I used that year to transition my clients to other lawyers in the firm. So the clients stayed with the firm.
Sure.
And then I said, well, I got to go find something else to do. And by happenstance, I ran into somebody that I used to work with like 20 years earlier.
Sure.
And he was a partner at a firm in Chicago. And I told him that I was going to stop practicing law. And he's like, well, what are you going to do? I said, I'm not sure. I'm looking at some things. And he said, I think I have the perfect job for you. I said, oh, well, what's that? He said, my firm needs a chief operating officer.
Okay.
So we need someone to come in and run the firm.
Gotcha.
No, you won't practice, no clients, no billable hours. You just run the firm.
How did you like that? Because I was an entrepreneur my whole life, and I was a chief operations officer for an engineering incubator. And it was the easiest job I ever had.
I loved it.
Because they were so screwed up. You fix one thing, and they're like, "Oh my God, how did you fix that?" Well, I'm not that smart. I don't have the intellect you have, but I base my intelligence on common sense and actions, and it was really easy. So didn't mean to interrupt, but was it that easy for you?
So I took the job. I started in January of 2020.
Okay.
So I took the job. Basically 3 months before the world shut down for COVID.
Oh.
So I did not envision that I was going to have to take, by the way, a firm that had 40 lawyers and 40 support staff, so 80 people that had never worked remotely ever, to take them 100% remote.
Had you worked remote prior?
I would sometimes work from home, but not with any frequency.
Sure.
It just wasn't something that law firms did. It just wasn't an option. And
Right.
so I had to take them literally like overnight to 100% remote. I had to navigate the firm through COVID, all the restrictions. And, lawyers don't like change. They don't
Sure.
like when things aren't the way they used to be. So I had a bunch of very conservative lawyers who were just beside themselves. So what do you mean people are working from home? People, they're not working. They're walking their dog. They're watching television. They're not working. So they were, pushing, we got to get people back in the office. And I'm pushing back saying, well, that's a nice idea, but the city of Chicago has basically said we can't, right? They've got all these guidelines.
There's no choice.
That we can't. So I had to navigate them through all of that. It wasn't what I signed up for. I thought I was going to come in, I was going to hire lawyers, be in charge of the staff, be in charge of the finances, work with their non-equity partners to try and develop books of business so they could become equity partners. I didn't think I was going to be, navigating them through a pandemic. That part, not so fun.
Right.
But being in charge of the firm and not having the pressure of having to keep clients happy, get new clients, try cases, it was fine. I finally had a 9-to-5 job.
Right, because what we learned in your last podcast was that you prepared a case as if there was no way it should go to trial because I'm going to win it. And if it goes to trial, I'm going to win it because I'm over-prepared.
Correct.
And you were meticulous.
Yes.
So now you don't have to do that.
No.
You don't have to over-prepare.
It was a weird transition because I was so used to being in the office before 7, working nights, working weekends. I finally had a job where I came in at 8 o'clock and they're like, "What are you doing here? Why are you here at 8? You're supposed to be here from 9 to 5." And I said, "Well, I can't really do 9 to 5." I said, I got to be here a little bit. I got to be here a little bit before 9. So they're like,
Sure.
okay, but they just could not believe that I was willing to take this role and really help them move the firm forward because they'd had a chief operating officer many years ago. And then it was someone who was a lawyer in the firm, and then he transitioned into being their COO. He then retired, and they said, well, we can get by without one. But the firm was big enough that they realized after about 4 or 5 years, we can't get by without one. Because
what were they lacking?
Everything that I was doing, they were having lawyers do.
Oh.
And so every time a lawyer has to do something that's non-billable, that's an hour that they don't have a billable time, right? So they were looking at it like, look, we're asking our lawyers to train our new lawyers. We're asking our lawyers to do the hiring, to do the firing, to be responsible for the staff, to keep an eye on. That's all time that we're taking away from billing our clients.
Right.
So for them, it was a huge time suck for the lawyers, and it was a money suck for the firm because they were losing hundreds of billable hours every year. So they finally were like, we got to find somebody who can come in and be the COO and just turn all that stuff over to them. And so when John, this guy that I used to work with, saw me at the airport and was like, oh, you're looking for a job. He said, I know you. I worked with you. I know how attention to detail you are.
Right.
You would be perfect as our COO. So I met with the owners of the firm, and they all liked me and said, yeah, we'd like you to come work for us. So I did that for 2 years. In 2021, I'd say probably the beginning, first quarter of 2021, my wife said, I'm ready to be done. I'm ready to be retired.
Was that partially because she saw the stress that was alleviated from you?
I think it was more of she was, because of her position, she also was working basically 7 days a week, 365 days a year. And she said, I've done it for 30 years and I'm done. I'm ready to be done. So when she told me that she was going to be done at the end of 21, I was like, well, so am I. I mean, I'm not going to keep working if you're not working. So we both made plans to transition out. I talked to the firm that I was the chief operating officer for in, I think in June, sometime around June, because I had a yearly contract with them. So I had a contract for the first year, and then we signed a contract for the second year. And they wanted to talk to me about signing a contract for the third year because they thought I was going to just
Right.
keep
Yeah,
doing
just
this
keep-
job,
yeah.
as long as they wanted me and as long as I wanted to do it. So I went to talk to the managing partner of the firm, and I told her, I said, I know that you said you want to talk to me about next year's contract. I just want to let you know I won't be signing a contract. And she's like, what do you mean? I said, well, I'm going to retire. I'm hanging it up. She's like, what do you mean? It's
Right.
like I'm going to retire. I'm done. She's like, are you going someplace else? I said, no, I'm not working. I'm going to retire. So she was very surprised. The firm was very surprised. The good news for the firm was my wife happened to know somebody who was looking for a new position, who they wound up hiring as my replacement, who has probably done an even better job than I did. They
Excellent.
have been very happy.
Nice.
So she's now been there for 3.5 years. She really likes it. The firm really likes her. So I didn't feel bad about leaving because we got them a replacement,
Right.
and they didn't miss a beat. She stepped right in. She actually started with the firm in November. So I had 2 months to basically show her the ropes and say, look, here's all the stuff that's going on. Here's all
Yeah.
the things that you need to know, the moving pieces. Here's where, you need to focus on these things. So she stepped right in. It was a smoothless transition.
Nice.
And so since
was the end.
since December 31st of 21, I've been a man of
Retired.
leisure.
How did you? How was that as a transition? I mean, I think it probably helped you that you went from, 24/7 working as a practicing attorney to a COO, and that probably helped you transition.
Yeah.
Because if you would have went from balls out to doing nothing, so. Was pickleball a big part of your life after? I mean, did pickleball start right after?
Yeah, I had not played before I retired.
December 31st?
Yeah.
Do you think it would have influenced your how passionate are you about pickleball? Would it have made you want to retire? I mean,
If I had been involved in it, yes, I probably would have said
Yeah,
I could spend a lot more time playing, so I should be
Right.
done. So it's probably a good thing I didn't get into it until after I retired.
Right.
I mean, you've seen, I'm basically, I play 3 hours a day. I go in
Yeah.
the morning and I basically try to get there by 8 and I leave about 11. And I do that year round. When I'm here in Arizona, I do that. When I'm back in Illinois, the only time I don't play in Illinois is if it's raining, because
Really?
the outdoor
Yeah.
courts
No.
can't play. It's too slick.
Yep.
Otherwise, I'm there every day.
All right, we'll get back to pickleball because I do have some
Okay.
things I want to talk
All
to you about pickleball, but we'll save that for the end, which is typically the Westbrook section.
Okay.
These podcasts have been going on for so long, and we really have a tradition we want to keep up with. You know that.
I got it.
So tell me about. So you obviously retired for a bit. You're playing pickleball. What made you want to write your first book, or was that part of the plan the whole time?
Well, I told people it was part of the plan, Steve. I'm not
Okay.
sure it really was part of
Sure.
the plan. So my first book was a biography of Alton Parker, who was
Yep.
a 1904 Democratic nominee for president. And until I wrote his biography, the only major party candidate for president who'd never had a biography written about him.
Really, what made you pick him? Just because of that, or
That was part of it.
Yeah, he must have had an interesting story.
I read probably 25 years ago. I read a book called "They Also Ran" that was written by Irving Stone, and it contained what I would call a mini biography of every man who had run for president and had lost.
really?
So there
Yeah?
was about 7 or 8 pages on Parker, and at the end of the first paragraph of Parker's section, Stone wrote, basically, of all the major party candidates for president, Parker's the only one who's never had a biography written about him.
Really?
And I just thought that wasn't right. I was like, well, why should there be a bio of everybody else, but this guy never had somebody write about him?
Well, maybe there was a reason.
Well, there was. I think what happened was Parker was he was a New Yorker. He was a lawyer and a judge. So
Okay.
he interested me because of my profession, because I was also a lawyer, and I thought, well, he's got to have a story. Everybody has a story. So I started collecting material on him, anything that I could find.
With the intent to write a book, or
With
okay.
the intention of someday,
Someday.
I would get around to writing his biography. And every 6 months or so, I'd do a Google search just to make sure that nobody had beat me to the punch. That
okay.
somebody
Yeah,
else had
yeah,
written
yeah.
the biography, and nobody had. And when people found out I was going to retire, they would always say, "Well, what are you going to do? I mean, you've been so involved in practicing law, and it's been such a big part of your life. What are you going to do with all your time?" And I would tell people, "Oh, well, I'm going to write this biography of Alton Parker." Not really. I don't really think I expected that I would do it.
Sure.
It was just
It was
something
just
I could
something to
tell
say.
people
Yeah,
so
yeah,
that
yeah.
they would leave me alone.
Yep.
And I retired, and I had a lot of time, and I walked into my home office one day, and I saw this bookshelf with all of the stuff about Parker that I had been collecting over the years, and I was like, you know what? I really should do it. And I'm not kidding. I sat down at the computer, and I started writing, and I wrote for 8 months straight, and got the book in what I thought was final form.
Sure.
And by that point in time, I had a publisher lined up.
Yeah.
I finished the manuscript, and I sent it off to them, and we went through the editing and review process, and they put the thing in final form and printed it. And when I was writing that book, I really got into it. I was really, it really gave me.
Well, hold on. Let me back up.
Okay.
You've never written a book before. I mean, what kind of preparation did you do? Did you Google how to write a book?
No. So I had written a lot of articles and book chapters. I had served as the general editor of 2 different legal books. So
sure.
I had some knowledge. You're right. I had never sat down and wrote a book, but I read a lot. And so I knew what the general framework was, certainly for a biography. And so I basically told this guy's story from the time he was born to the time he died, and then I put a final chapter together. This was actually at the suggestion of the publisher. I had ended the book with his death. Basically, it was like, he died on such and such a date. There was some information about his funeral. He had gotten married for a second time, so I talked a little bit about how long his second wife lived and what she did between the time that Parker died and she passed away. And that's how I ended the book. And the publisher, when they read the manuscript, the editor suggested to me, I think you should add another chapter. I think you should add a 16th chapter to the book.
Okay.
I was like, okay, what do you think
Why?
the 16th
Yeah.
chapter should be about? She said, I am very interested, and I think the readers would be interested to know, what kind of president do you think Parker would have made if he had gotten elected?
Oh, so
So I went back and I wrote a final chapter, 16th chapter, and that's basically the chapter is about what kind of a president do I think he would have made.
that must have been very fulfilling, because you did all this research and
Yes.
you're doing an autobiography and about him, and that's all factual. But then you got to do a fiction.
Yes.
A paragraph of a fiction as an author, and I say that very loosely because at that time you've written 15 chapters, but you must have been pretty full of pride.
Yeah, and it was a very good suggestion.
Yeah.
On the part of the publisher, because the book, I thought the book ended in a good spot, because maybe chronologically it made sense to end it right with his passing, but it did give me an opportunity to say, okay, based on everything I've learned about this guy, right, everything that I now know, and the things that were happening between 1904 and 1908, how do I think he would have handled those things?
Yeah.
And so it did give me an opportunity to kind of delve into his thought process and things that he had said and positions he'd taken, and be able to say, yeah, I think here's how he would have handled the financial panic of 1907.
Would he have been a good president?
Yes,
would it
I
have
think
changed our country? Or
no.
Okay.
I think he would have been. I think he would have been a very good president. America was very lucky in 1904 because they didn't have a bad choice, right? The Republicans had Teddy Roosevelt, who was and continues to be one of the most popular presidents we've ever had.
Yep.
And they had Alton Parker, who was a careful, decent, thoughtful lawyer and judge who came at problems, with a legal mind, right? So
Right.
the other good thing for the country is, during that time frame between 04 and 08, with the exception of the financial panic in 1907, there wasn't really anything major that happened for the country during that 4-year time frame.
Sure.
So it's not like there was, we almost got in a war, or there was, some huge international incident that you're like, well, I wonder if we would have been, better off with someone else in the driver's seat. Things were relatively steady. They were relatively calm. And by the way, my prediction, based on everything that I know about Parker, is he likely would have handled the response to the financial crisis in 1907 exactly the same way Roosevelt did.
Sure.
I don't think
Okay.
there would have been much difference. So
Right.
I think I think Parker would have been a very good president. I just don't think that there would have been any real difference between what we got and what we would have had
Right.
if Parker was in the White House.
Yeah. Okay. Well, good to know.
Yeah.
Good to know we didn't dodge a bullet or anything
No.
there. All right. Well, nice job. So what happened? So you're an author,
Yeah.
and then what happens?
So the second book came
Wait,
about.
hold on one second.
Okay.
Did you go do book signings and stuff like
Oh,
that?
yeah.
Did you promote
Yeah,
it?
yeah.
And was it a successful book?
Yeah, I mean, it's not on the Amazon bestseller list, right?
Right.
But it's sold several hundred copies. It's in 180 some libraries around the country and around the world.
Excellent.
So yeah, it was, and I feel very good that Parker's story was finally told, that people finally get to
Awesome.
to know about it.
Yeah. Well, I never knew about it. Now I'm going to have to go. Once it gets out on audiobook, I'll be all over
You'll
it.
be all over. I might have to read it. I might have to tape it for you. So
Yeah,
you can,
yeah,
you
that would be
listen to
awesome.
it.
Well, we could just do a 4 or 5. How many hours would it take you to read it all?
Oh, it would take
It'd
a
be
long. It would be pretty lengthy.
Yeah. So then you got the bug to be an author. Again?
Yeah. Well, yes. So the second book really was more of a necessity.
Okay.
So my wife and I teach a class every fall at the University of Illinois Law School.
Okay.
And
Well,
it's
that's really
a
nice.
class on pretrial litigation. So it's a class on basically handling a case from the filing of the complaint up to the point of trial. And we looked and couldn't find a textbook that we thought really covered what we wanted to cover.
Sure.
So we wrote our own. We sat down and gathered a bunch of things that I had previously written on various parts of the pretrial process, and we basically wrote this book, put it together from the time of the filing of the complaint up to the point of trial, put a lot of examples in the book of answers and complaints and motions to dismiss and motions for summary judgment and all the things that a lawyer
That can happen in
right,
that
would,
process.
would expect to encounter during the handling of a civil case. So that book really came about because we needed something for our class, and there wasn't anything that we thought really did the job.
So you wrote that after the first book. This is
Yes.
book number 2.
Yes.
And you wrote it with your wife. Is that the first time you really worked with your wife?
Yes.
And how was that? And I mean, you're teaching together. Are you teaching together?
Yes, we team teach the class.
Okay. And how is it working with your wife after? I mean, I'm sure. I mean, in her career, she had her own way of doing things.
Yes.
And you had your own way of doing
Yes.
things. How is it? You're still married. That's
We
good.
are.
Yep.
I think we complement each other very well.
Okay.
In the classroom.
Yeah.
We both look at things from a different perspective. We practice completely separate areas of the law. Deb did most of her work was in federal court. Most of mine was in state court. So we bring a different perspective between state and federal
Sure.
court. I think that we complement each other very well. It has been a very fun experience.
Yeah.
We just signed up to teach again this coming fall. So we're still having fun, and we're still going to keep doing it as long as we're having fun.
Well, and you met in law school.
Yes.
I mean, that's what's so
Yes.
cool. And now you're back in law school teaching and still happily
the same
married.
law school that we met at, and
Wow.
now we're teaching the next generation of lawyers.
That is cool.
Yeah, it's
that is
very fun.
cool.
It's
yeah.
very fun.
Book number 3.
So book number 3
Is this one out?
It will be out June 28th of this year.
All right, big announcement,
Big
everybody.
announcement.
June 28th.
Coming out June 28th. The third book really grew out of the research that I did for the Parker biography.
Okay.
So when Parker got the Democratic nomination in 1904, he did not he was not the unanimous choice of the Democratic Party. And when they left, the Democrats left their convention, essentially half of the people in the party said, we're not for him, we're not going to support him, we're not going to campaign for him. And part of the reason why he lost is because the Democratic Party split and only half of them would support him. So I started thinking, well, I wonder if that happened before or if it happened after. And it turns out, when I started looking into it, that there were 5 times between 1896 and 1924 when the Democrats had such a turbulent convention that they left and were unable to elect their nominee because of the turmoil in the party, with the exception of Woodrow Wilson in 1912. And the only reason Wilson won is because the Republican Party split that year.
Okay, I was going to ask, you know, how
So
you didn't do any research on the Republican Party other than that instance?
Correct.
Really? Okay.
So the third book, the title, it's a long one, but the full title of the third book is The Democrats in Turmoil, The Bitter Fights to Select a Presidential Nominee, 1896 to 1924.
Okay.
And it basically covers there are 3 chapters about each of the conventions: 1896, 1904, 1912, 1920, and 1924. And the first chapter for each of those conventions basically talks about the issues that the country was facing at that time. What were the political issues that the parties were grappling with? The second chapter provides a biography of every man, because at that point only men were seeking the presidency, every man who was a candidate for the nomination going into the convention. And then the third chapter is about the convention itself. Everything that happened at the convention from start to finish. And then it wraps up with a little bit of a discussion of how the inability to work together carried over into the general election, and ultimately on election day led to a defeat, except for Wilson in 1912.
Do you think you can take these books on history and impact opinions today about what is still happening today with indecision and motive and everything else going on?
I think people will read it and say, wow, he could be writing about 2024, right? 2020, 2024.
We're repeating history today.
And I'll tell you, Steve, when I wrote the Parker book, I asked my wife to read it before it went to the public. She was like, no, I'm not. It's not my thing. I'm not into history. I don't want to read it. So she didn't. But after it was published, she did read it. And she came to me and she said, I have to say, I learned an awful lot of things I didn't know when I read the bio. And I was also struck by how the things they were dealing with in 1904 we're still dealing with today.
Yes.
She said, I just didn't realize that history just kept repeating itself. And so I think people, certainly the third book, people will read it and be like, wow, some things, a lot of things haven't changed.
Right. So that's coming out June 20th. And you said do you want to talk about your fourth book?
I can.
Because I'm interested. I mean, it's kind of neat sitting with someone in the evolution of how you started and how that just spurred on to the next thing.
Yeah.
And that's life in general, I suppose. But so book number 4, give me a quick little story about that one.
Probably not going to surprise you. Book number 4 grew out of book number 3.
Oh my gosh.
So book number 4 is actually about the split in the Republican Party in 1912.
Okay.
And how that split essentially drove the progressives out of the Republican Party and has continued to impact the party to today.
Oh, wow.
So the working title of that book is The Men in the Arena, Roosevelt, Taft, and the Political Convention That Destroyed a Friendship.
Okay, that sounds great. One thing is the working title. You must just feel cool that you can say the working title. I mean, you're like, you're just throwing, well, the working title is this.
Yes.
I don't know what your working title is.
It might change.
Well, I hope so. I hope it shortens up because I think you need work on your working title. But I have to commend you. I mean, you're really, you can retire and just play pickleball, or you can really feel like you need to give back and keep doing something. So I think that's awesome about you. I could just end the interview there, even though we had an interruption. It's almost like part 3. But I want to circle back to pickleball. So, and you're awesome as a human being. I find that you and I, because we tend to talk as we play,
a lot.
people do not appreciate it. Because I hear people saying things about you like, I don't like playing with Brad. He just yakety yak. And I'm like, that's kind of me.
So Steve,
yeah,
maybe they might mean that about you too.
Yeah, I'm like, you don't like Brad or me, which I don't think either of us care.
No.
But I am surprised that people at our level of playing, I mean, we play probably from in the threes.
Yeah.
3-0, 3-5 area,
Yeah.
right? That they take the game so serious that they do not want to have fun. And because that's what I love about pickleball. I can in basketball, I would do the same thing. I didn't need to be in better shape in basketball to trash talk, but I love trash talking. Yeah. I love hitting between the legs. Can I tell you a quick story?
Sure.
So I like to hit between the legs. You know,
I have seen that.
And it's people do not like it, and they hit you hard back at you. That's fine. I don't care. One night I'm having cocktails with my wife, and she was in a mood, and she goes to me, Steve, and she had listed off a few things that she wasn't really happy about with Steve, which were not, I didn't care, because it was Steve. She said, and between the legs, you look like an asshole, and you shouldn't do that. You just look bad. And I'm like, babe, that's who you married. Do you want the guy that doesn't do it between his legs, or do you want the guy that does it between his legs? Because that's who I am, and that's who you are. I can't change. Our personality comes out on that pickleball court, and it's fun. I don't have to constantly talk, but when I'm in a good mood and it's the right people, it's so much fun.
I agree with you.
I think
makes the game
it's
more
an art.
Enjoyable when you're able to talk to people, have fun.
Yeah.
So Deb said to me, my wife said to me the other day, she said, my God, she said, I was all the way over on the other side and I could hear you.
Right.
She said, you were all the way, and there were people on my side that were like, well, Brad's here. We can, he's certainly here. I said, well, I just like to have fun.
Right.
She said, you're making noises and laughing. And I was like, well, that's me. That's just me. I can't help it.
Well, like Deb, we live in a community that you leave and you come back. And as soon as Brad gets back, they hear him on the pickleball. Oh, Brad's back.
He's back.
Brad's back. So, well, we're going to end it right there with Brad's back. So I can't wait to hear about the 4th book. I've heard about it, but I feel very ignorant about my country's history because of you. But thank you for that. And I can always go learn. I guess.
You can always go learn.
All
I'll
right.
have to start recording so that you can learn a little quicker.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Steve.
You have a good one. Thanks for coming. Thank you for listening to the Meet Your Neighbor podcast. If you enjoyed today's conversation, be sure to subscribe so you never miss an episode. And feel free to share this podcast with friends and fellow neighbors. Until next time, take care and keep connecting.